Welcome back to the Bees Like That podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris. And today, as y'all can tell, we have a special guest in the house again. This is my wife. My wife. That's how you say it in America. Wife. Been a long time coming. I would have preferred to have gotten this second episode done a lot sooner, but I guess it bees like that sometimes. Can't always get what you want when you want it. Can't
Sick.
always get what you want. That
I
sounds
was
like
sick.
what?
I was
Almost
sick.
exactly like the original song. Say it doesn't and you just nothing but a hater. All right. So today I want to talk about a bunch of different stuff and I have some questions. So I'm gonna just jump right in.
Okay.
The first one, I want to talk a little bit about what I believe to be the most loving part of compassion. And some people look at me like I'm wacky when I say this, but I don't know. It feels true and it feels right to me. And I'll explain to you why and what I'm talking about. Accountability. Why is that, in my view, the most loving part of compassion? Well, for a couple of reasons. Because what we're saying to people when we offer them accountability in a compassionate way or as an element of compassion, what we're saying to them in that moment is, I truly value you and I love you. How are we saying that? We demonstrate that by not standing in the way. I won't say that we're giving because we have these things inherently as human beings, but we're not standing in the way of self-determination and agency, which I hope we all understand as human beings are essential and invaluable to success and progress. And I don't expect everyone to agree with me on this. I think that everyone has different approaches to compassion. What is your view on accountability when I say that I feel like it is the most loving part of compassion, element or component to compassion?
I would say I agree with that. I think holding someone accountable not only it's not only important for the relationship that you have with that person, but it's important for that person as well, like in building their self-esteem and their self-confidence and learning new behaviors. I mean, just thinking about how I've been in the past and how I am now with my family members and you holding me accountable or to a higher standard has made me rise to that
Hmm.
and accomplish things that I would have never thought possible at one point in my life. Then again, it's hard sometimes to hold people accountable for me to
Hmm.
hold people accountable because I give a lot of grace sometimes when it's not warranted.
Hmm.
um yeah.
Well, I don't think that that is a completely flawed approach. I think that there's a balance to be struck there, right? When I talk about accountability in the way that I do, I don't approach it from like a tough love perspective, like an either or like extremely black and white. There are going to be degrees of this that, I think an effective services worker or social worker is going to be able to determine with some experience. And I think you're talking about that. Um, what I definitely don't mean to say is that that kind of accountability being in place or being appropriate, do we not then offer support? No, I don't think that's appropriate. I think that if support is available and a hand up, right, into the things we're talking about, self-determination, because what builds confidence? Personal wins.
Yeah.
Confidence doesn't come by way of me doing for someone else. There may be
No.
elements of gratitude, right? Like a person, be like, damn, that would have taken me forever if you would not have, done or helped me with this. But, and that, not to say that that's not appropriate sometimes, but again, um, sure, we offer support, but at the end of the day, it is important that people are reminded of how powerful their ability to choose and to decide for themselves, life, happiness, success, etc.,
Yeah.
on their own without the reflexive interference of people who I think for the most part want to do good. They want to contribute well to others, especially marginalized or victimized people, populations, excuse me, who otherwise really struggled to activate in such a way that it would help them reach that escape velocity, like you and I found, um, coming out of our own addiction and different desperate situations. um, and that I think ties pretty easily into the next question, kind of statement that I have. You and I think I can speak for both of us here because I'm extremely close to my personal journey, but close to yours as well. I think we're parts of each other's journey for sure. Respecting our individual programs. Um, we would not have been successful had we not gotten completely sober and practiced like actual recovery. I know that to be 100% true. There's a growing contingent of what they would prefer to be seen as creative and progressive thinkers. Like they want to be like, I don't know, maybe on like the cutting edge of these things regarding recovery and abstinence and all this stuff. But I want to get your idea about that particular thing that I find to be really peculiar, which is I call it the some safely model, um, which I have to resist wholeheartedly from the beginning because the disease of addiction that I have is one that is progressive and increasingly dangerous as time goes by with continued use. What happens when you stop suddenly the use of alcohol and you have physical dependence? You go into withdrawal. Same thing with benzos, same things with fentanyl, same thing with methadone, same thing with Suboxone. Now, I don't completely deride MAT, and I think that would be it is a separate conversation. What I'm talking about is the moderation of dangerous drugs like fentanyl. So I'm completely against an idea that a person suffering from a progressive illness such as addiction can safely use any substance. But again, I don't expect that everyone will agree with me 100% down the line, but I did want to get your perspective on this growing popularity of this newish idea that some use is safe and should be considered.
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking to a friend about this today at length. We're both on the same page with it, and we're of unpopular opinion in our world of services that we work in. And for me, I think it's an absolute hard no. You cannot use substances safely. Now, I tried. I did that. I did that research. I tried lots of times, like, with drinking and or pot smoking and then even meth and I mean, thankfully I didn't use fentanyl. Um, but of what we know about fentanyl, what the just the normal public knows about fentanyl is like, and we know much more because we work in the industry. We worked at Detox. We were boots on the ground, saw it all the time in our face. And it is such a different drug. It's so much more dangerous. Um, and yeah, I've heard you mention it before on your podcast and stuff. And it's plain Russian roulette. There's no safe way. And in particular with what we do in our, careers, trying to help people, get their families back and intact, you know, we want people to get their kids back, but we want them to get their lives back. And you can't get your
Mm.
life back wholeheartedly while you're still trying to use substances
Mm.
safely. I mean, that's the dumbest term I've ever heard.
Mm.
And it just won't happen, you know, not it just it won't happen. I firmly believe that, you know, prove me wrong. I don't know,
Please.
but that's where my stance is. And yeah, and I just it's just so dangerous. It's so dangerous. I mean, every time you turn on the news or look at Facebook, you know, people are overdosing in record numbers. I mean,
Mm.
I went years without knowing anyone that overdosed on drugs. Even when I was using heavily, like
Yeah.
that was so rare.
Yeah.
And now, you know, I mean, I just had a client that was, you know, in and out of detox, like since when I worked there, probably over a dozen times. And he finally got clean, and he was clean, and he was, you know, doing it, and he
Mm.
relapsed and he died. And it's like, it's sad and it's scary, and there's no safe way to use fentanyl,
Mm.
period.
That I thank you too for pointing that out, because one thing I neglected to do was to single fentanyl out, and that's what I meant. So I'm glad that you picked up on that and highlighted that. Because man, growing up like around addiction since as long as I can remember, and being around the halls of AA and even NA and around recovery in that capacity before I had a dependence or even dabbled in drugs, like there was always, and it was openly not even disputed, like it was a thing. You didn't distinguish um addiction between preferred drugs of choice, right? So like an alcoholic, a heroin addict, someone who is addicted to prescription drugs, whatever. A drug is a drug. That conversation stops when we get to fentanyl. Because like you say, one never knows when you get that next fentanyl pill, whether or not that very well really, and this isn't propaganda. This isn't like reefer madness, fear mongering. We see it. Washington and Oregon in 2023 saw the sharpest increase of fentanyl poisoning across the board in all 50 states. And that can be attributed to a bunch of stuff. But speaking directly just to the dangerousness of fentanyl, again, what erring on the side of caution and fully understanding, and I can't reiterate this enough, the progressive nature of this illness. Fentanyl takes that and ratchets it up 100-fold.
Yeah.
And what people don't get is that there's no like, all right, I'm gonna smoke half a pill while my kids are at school. They're gonna come home and I'm not gonna smoke for the rest of the night. It doesn't go that way. Like it doesn't go that way with any drug, right? Like you're still drinking in the closet, you know, whatever, because that rapid onset of acute withdrawal symptoms, we all who've gone through it understand the physical cues when it's coming, and we want to nip that shit in the bud like right away. And when you're talking about fentanyl, which in this way is akin to crack, which has been something that I'm keenly familiar with because my dad was addicted to it for a long time. Like when you smoke dope like that, you're smoking like you have a version of this active addiction, of this disease and active addiction for a prolonged period of time, like you're smoking dope. Like you're not holding on to, you know, a pill for later. You might try, but it doesn't go that way. Um,
No, because these withdrawal symptoms are so severe, and the people that go through it like get so sick so fast that from what I witnessed at detox, you know, and you did too, that, you know, they're smoking every 10, 15 minutes. And if they push in like an hour and they are literally
yeah,
act like they're dying.
yeah. Oh
Like
yeah.
that's when people, I mean, there's been so many times when people have come, finish their complete intake, which takes about, you know, depending on the person, you know, like 40 minutes with a counselor intake and everything,
Mhm.
discharging right as soon as, because that 40
Gone.
minutes and they can't handle it.
Gone. Yep.
Yeah.
Right away. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you brought that up too, because that just that's like the nail in the proverbial coffin, and it's so true. I saw that so many times. People would have their car in that alley back there, and they would call me
Yep.
like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm just in my car. I'm gonna smoke a cigarette." And I'm not one to shy. I'll go out there and be like, "What are you doing, man? What are you doing?" Okay, well, you
Yeah.
can't bring any of that shit inside. And they got like the foilie right there. They're taking a blast. And then we don't even make, I've had it where we didn't even make it through my portion of the intake. Granted, I was a little slower than some of the other DTS, but I'm talking about a half an hour. And they're like, I got to come back another time. It's too
Yeah.
much. I've never,
Yeah. You know,
yeah. And it's a withdrawal that's not like any other.
no, thankfully I've never like experienced it for myself, but just watching these people go through it, you know, like, yeah, like never, I mean, I can't imagine that kind of pain. And, you know, and you got drug addicts are, you know, we're actors, man. We'll
Oh,
lay
for
it on
sure.
thick, you know, and we're in there and we want those meds that are, you know, are
Yeah,
gonna just like maybe take the edge off. They don't do anything more than that. But
yeah,
and yeah, we be putting on a show, Oscars
yeah,
all around.
for real. And what a lot of people don't know about withdrawal from fentanyl, other opiates too, but fentanyl especially, like there's a hard 36 hours. Like it may vary depending on the person and like their level of active addiction, like where they're at and like their tolerance and dependence level. But there's a pretty hard and fast 36-hour rule that any like withdrawal symptom intervention prior to that, they go into precip and it's like 0 to 100. Like they don't go through like the preliminary stages where it builds on itself. And at least psychologically, you can kind of try to prepare yourself like, okay, whew, that's at my ankles, now it's at my knees. All right, now it's waist deep. Like we're in the fucking shit now. No, it's bam, you're you're off to the races. That means puking, shaking,
Shitting,
shitting your
all of
pants,
it.
all
Yeah,
the
all of it.
above. Not sleeping, feeling like the skin, the meat is just like melting off of your bones literally aching, which is an odd sensation because your bones don't have nerves like the way that the rest of your body does. Um, yeah. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about, well, I mean, I feel like it ties in because this idea that is held by some of our professional peers who are adjacent to the experience, meaning they've never had the experience of addiction or withdrawal from any substances, so they're always going to be on the outside observing. So they will always have kind of a skewed perception of what it actually means. Um, and there's no secret that that kind of like privilege and dysfunction exists everywhere in systems, from detox to treatment agencies to, I mean, nonprofit housing services alike. And all of these people who I think are well intentioned have some pretty dangerous ideas. Um, but it's unavoidable because all of these systems and agencies and programs are ran by human beings. So I say that to say this: when we're considering people at their worst, whether we're talking about addicted populations, how that intersects with race, gender, et cetera, it doesn't matter. Um, I offer an invitation to these people, and this can be tough because you find a contingent of them who've been doing this work for an indeterminate amount of time, long ass time, so they've not really been challenged in these ways, and they've grown comfortable with this level of privilege. And they've not, I don't think, been invited in the way that I'm about to, but an invitation nonetheless for being called forward and examining and acknowledging in a meaningful way that privilege, position, and power, and how some of these dangerous ideas like the some safely, and the overt use and misuse and abuse of privilege, how dangerous that can be for people, right? Because at the end of an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day, or if you're like a soldier for social justice, maybe in a 12-hour day, you're gonna go home. And you've not taken bold risks and openly associated with strong voices and really double down on truth the in the fight against some of these more regular norms, even though the regular norms, they're incorrect. How dangerous and damaging it can be if left unchecked, this privilege and this power and this ego and these positions. What do we do there? How in this circumstance, what's your approach? Because I know that our approaches vary. I'm a more like, I'm a sock you, split your head to the white meat, and how you take it is just going to be how it's going to be. But I think it's appropriate and valuable to get different perspectives and approaches. So I want to know yours.
I don't know. I don't know that I have a conscious approach. I think I have just been myself. Like there was some meetings that I was in, and afterwards, some of my professional, they're not technically coworkers, whatever, but like they're like, oh, you connect so well, or oh, I didn't think of that, or like I just kind of, I don't try to educate, not that I wouldn't, but I just think I just am myself, and I'm pretty transparent, as you've shared before. Like I don't really hold much back. So I'm always like, well, in my case, or what worked for me, um, I always share. I'm pretty openly share with whoever's in the room, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
So
Your approach is a lot more in your face.
so I'm gonna offer you a comparison here. If you give me a
Okay.
second. So looking at your approach, can you acknowledge in that example that you gave to me, which I think is great. I think that everyone in this world should be able to enter space and be able to inform and educate by way of just being authentic and just being yourself, and not to have to consciously worry about different elements of like securing or whether or not this is going to X, Y, or Z. Um, I don't have that. I don't have
No,
that.
I was just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and this isn't a challenge. I'm asking you, like, can you see the differences and where in situations where I would be more compelled in a literal sense, whether it be for my safety or people who look like me, their safety, to educate people, because it's not as safe for me to exist around like flawed opinions as it is for someone like you or a white person, right?
Or a white person. I am a white person. Although I don't feel like one. No, I'm just kidding. No, but no, and I was gonna say that, but yeah, when you after you started talking that, no, for sure. I am like the standard, you know, middle-aged white lady that, occupies these spaces. So I'm not gonna be, they're not gonna really raise an eyebrow at me. I mean, some might, but just because,
Mm,
but not in the same sense that they would with you. You are you're middle-aged black man that, they don't expect you in these spaces, period.
right,
They just don't.
right.
And they see you and it's a shock, and they're probably confused, maybe scared.
Mm,
I mean, that's the reality. It's disgusts me, but I mean, that's the reality. And um no, absolutely, absolutely, you know, we have these conversations all the time in private. And
right,
so,
we do.
but for the sake of this podcast, absolutely, I recognize that and see that. And I guess for my part, it's my responsibility to call people out on that kind of behavior
Mhm.
when I see it, when it's overtly, well, but you know me, I'm such a ding. Like, I have the time I don't even notice stuff. You're like, did you not see that? And I was like, no, what? And that's my white
Yeah.
privilege. That's growing up in Whatcom County, all around white people, and it's wild. And yeah, you got a lot harder.
So, yeah, there's definitely, so this is something that I try to get across to people. And I try to, I'll say it in different ways. Because when I've said it this way, um, I still get resistance, but when I've said it this way, I've gotten even more resistance. You can like see the physical like discomfort in people form, and you can like I feel like it can at times kind of reach out and touch it. Um, but there's an idea that the problem is with my level of self-awareness. There's an idea that the problem is with um, my disposition or presentation or the way that I speak directly to issues and to people. That's not the problem. The problem is in my blackness. It's never been my blackness. It's never been my disposition. It's never been my strong opinions. It's never been my conviction. It's never been my confidence. The problem has always been other people's problems with those things in me, right? Um, and being able to get to a place to have someone like you, for instance, who I thank you for coming on this podcast and having this conversation with me. We do have these talks in private, but these are the kind of bold associations that I think are important that people need to see and that remain visible, because it's really easy to lean into default and say things, that it may not even feel like in the moment that this is what we're doing, but in fact it is. Um, Leaning into privilege and saying, yeah, I'm going to use my privilege in this way. And even not in the moment, maybe not in the moment saying to intentionally prop up the status quo, but that is in fact what you're doing. If what you're doing is not centering voices like mine, bodies like mine, and being bold and doubling down on those associations, this is the way that we change the status quo. The way that we do not change the status quo is to first secure the feelings and sensibilities of white fear in the status quo.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it may not seem like it to you because, like you say, we talk about this stuff all the time, but these are brave associations. And I'm telling you, I've I've uh I've attempted to have people on who I want to have these conversations with who haven't said it, but are terrified and will never, they will never come on because they know me and they know that I'm not going to shy away from the harder topics and I'm going to not to pressure them, but I guess, yeah, maybe a bit, put them on the spot and be like, look, you have to, as a person in services, I believe that anyone in services, there's an element of activist to you that I think has to be called forward and invited to, again, acknowledge and closely examine in a meaningful way privilege, power, and ego, and how those things unchecked and unregulated and used incorrectly can 100% cause harm. And I mean, not the, I mean, like physical harm to bodies, right? Like actual harm to bodies. Because yeah, I'll reserve that comment, but um I get it. I get it. I don't expect, it would be nice if the some of the people that I admire and whose opinions I think are important and who I still believe contribute immense amounts of good to our community in their roles and services. It would be great if they would come on and take a bolder stance, be a bit braver, because that's what good is privilege and a level of comfort if you never risk losing even a portion of it. What do we? That's just chicken shit in my book. And then, pardon my language, but I think people need to embrace being uncomfortable a bit more and step into bolder stances. And I know I'm not alone in my opinion on this. If I was, man, I'd either be rich or dead. How do you feel about activism and bolder open associations to centering, first doing away with the idea that Black powerful voices are novel, and second, using privilege and position to center those voices for good, especially when you know they can do good.
I mean, I'm all for that. And I support that 100%. I mean, as far as me being have an activist spirit, I don't think that I do so much. I mean, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I do. I don't know. I just don't feel that way. Um, I know I have in the last, like, I don't know, year maybe,
Mm.
have taken bolder steps. It's just I don't know if it was the way that I was raised or just like my lack of self-confidence or, I mean, like, I don't know. I only have, 5 years clean, which seems like a long time for some people, but I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm still finding my voice.
Mm,
And
for sure.
I because like I mean, our life was a wreck.
Yeah.
It really was. And like, not that I'm not capable of like handling a lot of other things, but it's like at the end of the day, I just want to be with you and the kids and and like cherish that time. And I'm totally getting off topic, but just to like
Think so.
it it's like that stuff matters. It matters so much.
Mm.
And I at times just like I struggle to find the confidence or like the opening. I don't know, like how do I do that? How do I be more activist
Well,
to bring
I think it's important to define what that means for you, because
yeah, see, and I don't even know.
yeah, it doesn't have to mean the same thing for you that it does for me.
No.
There's plenty of ways to be active that don't involve doing a lot of the stuff that I do. I think that the way that you advocate for people and the way that you connect with people, that's an activist spirit. Because there's there are people out there who would be terrified, especially after our experiences, to then come back. And you talk about finding your confidence and voice. I think that you found a freaking truckload of it because you've been able to come back into the same spaces from the opposite side of the table to be now on this side of the table with what I see to be a pretty firm grasp on who you are, what your opinions are, and how and when you're willing to fight for people. So I would say that you need to give yourself a little more credit for real.
I probably do. You know, yeah, it's like life is so hard. And then when you open your eyes, you know, wider and you just see all that's wrong,
Mhm.
and it's can feel like a mountain
Mhm.
and just like so insurmountable. I don't know. Like, it's like, where do you freaking begin? Like,
I think a good place to start is with what God puts on your heart.
yeah,
That's what I do. And that's literally what I do. The things that I feel are the heaviest on my heart, and there's only one place that stuff can come from. This stuff that you do, that I do, that we do, people like us that we do, it's not about us. It can never be about us. It should never be about us. Um, because it doesn't come from us. That spirit to get involved and to do this stuff, that's not for me. I mean, there are definite like byproducts that I benefit from. Yeah, I changed careers and like I'm in a very fortunate position right now to do an incredible amount of good in both of us and to sustain ourselves and our family. Um, but those messages for the stuff that we do come from a higher authority. And like I say, they cannot ever be about us because when it becomes about us or an individual, doesn't just using us as an example, then it becomes about winning. Then it becomes about curation, and then it becomes about position, and then becomes about power, and less about community, less and less about service. And then that's where you can obviously see a clear distinction between self-awareness and where people lose themselves and their identity becomes something just ugly,
yeah.
gross. And today, man, I don't know. Today, today is a hard day. Today, I'm a lot dealing with a lot today. Um,
Mhm.
but I don't know. Regardless, these conversations are important. But if there were one thing as a person in services and trying to, I think this will be the thing that I let you take us out on. If there were one thing, folding in as naturally as possible, all of the stuff like advocacy, social justice, community, service, spirituality, growth. If there were one thing or one way, one bit of guidance as an ally, someone who lives as a white person in a non-white household, like what could you offer people who, even if not in your similar exact position, but in similar positions, facing the same things, looking at the same barrier or not barriers, but challenges when being of service and being a provider? What do you think, like right now for you, the things that sustain you, what would be the best bit of advice or takeaway you could give to another person who's an ally or advocate or would like to become one?
Hmm. You know, I mean, I think to really listen with an open mind and heart, to use your voice, my voice, and like I've learned so much from you over the years. And at first, you know, it was like, and this was just me, I don't know, just to be really transparent and personal, like I would feel embarrassed to be like listening to you because I didn't know these things, you know, or the history, or I didn't experience them. And so, but not to feel sorry because I don't think that you want that. You,
Mm.
you know, you want a partner and someone, that's going to advocate for you and be an ally and with you. And so I don't know. I mean, I ask you questions and you don't make me feel stupid. And I think that that's really important, if someone's coming from a sincere place is,
Mm.
because it's you, and then we have a mutual friend, you know, who's an older Black man, and he taught me a lot too. And and just having those conversations and being allowed to maybe say something that is like, whoa, you can't say that, like, don't do that. Like,
Right.
oh, that's not what, oh, okay. But, feeling safe enough to make those mistakes and then, and learn.
Mm.
And I don't know. I mean, I guess it's not really giving advice. It's just like, just don't be afraid to be an ally. Because I think a lot of people are like, they don't want to, I don't know, or they're fake allies.
Mm. You're talking about them slacktivists,
Yeah.
performative
Like
activists.
you be saying this, but you be doing this. And it's like,
Right.
that's not,
Right.
like, don't be one of
Right.
those.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you may have unintentionally, and maybe intentionally, I can't speak for you, but you said something really beautiful and a point that I make all the time. Well, two. One you didn't make, but they go together. So for people of color, when you hear someone say, is it always got to be about race? The answer is always, yeah, it does. Unfortunately, not by choice, this is a part of our reality. I didn't ask it to be this way. It's just the way that it is. And with regard to being an ally and being brave in those spaces, brave enough to be able to make mistakes, that is so important. Acknowledging and recognizing that you're gonna get it wrong, but having people in your corner that will check you with love, like, because right is right and wrong is wrong, and I love you and I want, to guide you um, in ways of and learning about me and my community that are healthy for you, and to help you understand me. And that helps you inform other people that I can't get to, because
Yeah.
there are barriers. Because there's
Yeah.
a real thing that happens is that people in power, they definitely, and this is a disgusting practice, but it happens. It's happened to me, and I've had to fight against it, and my fights have been successful. But it does happen that Black bodies in professional spaces are intentionally managed and movement intentionally limited and monitored. This is just a fundamental part of racism and the systems in place that I fight actively to resist. And like I said, I've been successful, but to the point that there are places that you will in this life have access to that I won't. And so being tying into that earlier point of being brave enough, having the intestinal fortitude to have bold associations, even when unpopular in those spaces, to be like, look, nah, acting as a proxy and ally, that, delivering messages appropriately about equity and justice,
Mhm.
especially with regard to just human bodies, period. Humanity and decency.
Yeah.
Right? We got shit to do, dog.
I know.
We got shit to do. But I love you and thank you for
Yeah.
coming on the podcast again. And if y'all didn't do it on the way in, please think about doing it on the way out. Hit that like, subscribe, and post notification bell so you can stay up to date on all the fun, life-changing, pivotal, polarizing, and possibly shit that gonna piss you off we talk about here on the It Bees Like That podcast. Peace, y'all.